This is Democracy Watch. So we've got some huge news out of Wisconsin. Mark, your firm has just filed a lawsuit against that state's gerrymandered congressional maps. So I should remind people that a few weeks back, Wisconsin's legislative maps were struck down, but these are the seats that'll impact the House of Representatives. So what is the basis on which this lawsuit was filed?
Yeah, let me first say, Brian, every one of our shows, you're always like, what about the
I
congressional map
know.
in Wisconsin? Right, you've been asking for this. So here we are. We finally filed this lawsuit. And the basis is really straightforward, which is that the Wisconsin Supreme Court, as you recall, was dominated by conservatives for a very long time. And when the redistricting process took place in 2021, they adopted a very peculiar rule, which said that they were going to start with the last enacted map, which had been a gerrymandered Republican map passed by the Republican legislature. And they're going to start with that as the baseline because the governor and the legislature couldn't agree, so the courts had to draw the map. And they were going to start with that and do what they call least change. Well, in a recent lawsuit challenging the state legislative maps that was, as you recall, successful, we did a Democracy Watch on that I hope everyone goes and follows. I know you'll put the link up for that one. That was a really important victory, not only because it ungerrymandered the map for the state legislature, but also because the court said that the least change approach is not in accordance with Wisconsin law and the Wisconsin Constitution. And that opened the door for folks who we had represented in the congressional case back in 2021 to bring a motion to the state Supreme Court and say, hey, this map was least change and should be redrawn.
Can you talk about the insanity of this concept of least change when the previous maps have all been gerrymandered and then it becomes like a constitutional or a state constitutional principle that you can't really change the maps from the currently existing gerrymandered maps?
Yeah, it really it was a very disappointing ruling at the time. It was a ruling of a very conservative majority. It was a 4-3 court, but the four justices who were in the majority in Wisconsin were very conservative on issues involving voting and voting rights and fair maps. And you're exactly right. The idea that a court would adopt as its baseline map the map that everyone admits was a partisan gerrymander from one political party. It just doesn't make any common sense, but that's where the court was. And thankfully, we did episodes also about the Wisconsin judicial election, and that changed the composition of that court. And the more moderate liberal majority in the state legislative case said least change is not appropriate, and that's what the foundation of this case is now for Congress.
Now, are there any other recent court wins in other states that could inform the lawsuit that's being filed, that's being litigated in Wisconsin?
So look, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about redistricting litigation around the country, and it's important for people to have the big picture, which is that, frankly, the courts are doing the hard work around redistricting. We saw in Alabama them draw an additional Black Opportunity District. Louisiana, look, it looks like the Republican governor even is going to agree after the court struck down that map to add an additional Black Opportunity District. Georgia struck down the map there, less happy with the remedial map. And of course, in New York, we saw a landmark ruling there to allow the nonpartisan independent redistricting commission, the bipartisan independent redistricting commission, redraw a map. So each of these cases is sort of state specific, but I do think that they speak to a broader trend that we have seen and that certainly people in Wisconsin see, which is that, the role of the courts is not to rubber stamp partisan abuse, whether it is partisan abuse in Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, that disadvantages Black voters, whether it was the fact that we had a Republican appointed judge in a very rural part of New York hire a special master and not allow the bipartisan commission to draw a second opportunity, have a second opportunity to draw a map, or now in Wisconsin, where the court has said, look, in the state legislature, that those maps are unconstitutional for a different reason, the so-called contiguity problems, but we're not going to allow least change to drive the show. And that now, all of that builds to where we are now for hopefully what will be fair maps in Wisconsin for Congress.
And just as a quick aside, if you want to support Marc and his team for all the monumentally important work that they're doing, including with this very case in Wisconsin, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the free news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting in elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen and in the post description of this video. Again, if you appreciate the work that these people are doing, then this is the best way to support them. Marc, you had just mentioned the role that the courts have right now in combating partisan gerrymandering that's being perpetuated by these Republicans. Do you think that we are past the golden age of gerrymandering by Republicans?
No, no. I mean, look at what we have seen in the Republican Party in the last few years. They have become more and more extreme and more desperate to wield majority power with a shrinking minority of the vote. And that demographic change that Donald Trump has only hastened is going to plague the Republican Party for a very long time. And what that means is that they are going to have to resort to cheating in order to win, right? They have to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat. And partisan gerrymandering for them is a way they cheat the electorate out of fair maps so that they can maintain majority power without majority control. Take a look at just this Wisconsin case we're talking about. You know, Wisconsin is as close to a 50-50 state as you can find. You know, it has Tammy Baldwin, who is a pretty liberal, moderate Democrat. It has Ron Johnson, who is an extreme conspiracy theorist. Those are the two senators. You have a Democratic governor who won handily. Joe Biden won narrowly in 2020 after Hillary Clinton lost narrowly in 2016. So if anything, it has a slight Democratic cast to it, I'd say, but it's a pretty evenly divided state. And yet the congressional map that we are talking about is 6-2, 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats. Like, in what world would you look at the demographics and the geography and the electoral results in Wisconsin and predict a 6-2 map? And the reason why we have it is because it's the only way that when you multiply that out across the country, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, right? It's the only way that Republicans have an opportunity or a chance to stay in power in the US House. And so, you know, Mike Johnson, who is a avowed insurrectionist and apparently a fairly incompetent speaker to boot, which may be a good thing, by the way, in some ways, like, his only path is to continue to perpetuate using the gerrymandering and other voter suppression tactics. So no, I wish I could say we're over the golden age of Republicans doing this, but I think they are desperate to cling to power and they'll continue at it.
Well, that only underscores the importance of the work that you and your team and other plaintiffs across the country are doing. Marc, this is the other question that I ask every episode, but will these maps, will this lawsuit be adjudicated by 2024, by the election?
100%. Yeah, I can promise that. Win, lose, or draw, this is going to be done in time for 2024. You know, remember what I said at the beginning. It was the filing of a motion in a case that had been litigated in 2021. So this is not going back to the trial court. This is starting in the state Supreme Court, right? The question is whether the state Supreme Court should reopen this case and order a new map for 2024. And for the lawyers out there, or the people who are afraid of this thing called the Purcell Doctrine, which is what federal courts, Supreme Court uses to sometimes tell federal courts it's too late. Purcell Doctrine is a doctrine of the federal courts, not the state courts. And this case is in the state courts. So I fully expect that the Wisconsin Supreme Court will hopefully hear this case quickly. And if they do, we could get a resolution very quickly for 2024, because every election that goes by, you know this, you and I have talked about this, every election that goes by where there are illegal maps is a tragedy for democracy. It is an affront, it is an insult to the voters who are asked to cast their ballots, to stand in line, to go to the inconvenience of voting. For them to do that is an insult where they are doing it in maps as gerrymandered as they are in Wisconsin, where the courts could step in and could remedy it.
Is it unusual that this case is going through the state court system, even though the issue of federal legislators going to the House of Representatives, I guess the argument could be made that it should be a federal court issue?
Yeah, so look, we've talked about a mix. The Voting Rights Act cases, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana went to federal court. We talked about the important case, and we shouldn't forget this case because it is still pending, and there is still time for 2024 in Florida. There is a case that in Florida, my team won at the trial court to add in a second black opportunity, an additional black opportunity district there. We won at the trial court. It got reversed in the Court of Appeals. That case is going out now to the Florida Supreme Court, and there's time there. So there are, and of course, the cases we've talked about in New York are all in the state courts. The cases in North Carolina we talked about were all in the state courts. So it's a mix. The question is whether the claims being brought are federal claims or they are state claims. We have a federalism, a system of federalism in this country where state courts apply state law and federal courts apply federal law. States courts can also apply federal law. But there's no disparagement of the state courts. That's what the Republicans tried to pull with the independent state legislature theory. They wanted to knock the state courts out of the game. And thankfully, due to a lot of hard work, including some lawyers at my firm, we fought against the independent state legislature theory and preserved the rights of state courts to hear these cases.
Now, if the state Supreme Court rules in favor of ungerrymandering the maps, which hopefully they do, is there a way for Republicans to appeal this at all? Is there a way for them to try to appeal this to the federal court system, or is whatever the state Supreme Court says final?
So this is kind of, I realize Republicans just say stuff. And like sometimes I overthink it. I don't know if you do that. Like sometimes you hear Republicans say something, you're like, do they have like some really secret plan that I haven't thought about? And then you realize,
or are they just letting words fall out of their face?
Right. Or they just right, exactly. Remember how much the media did this with Donald Trump? They're like, he's very strategic. And when and they realize, like, no, he's just an idiot.
Yeah.
The Republicans have said that they are going to appeal the state legislative maps. And I'm just scratching my head because like there is no way to appeal the decision of the Wisconsin Supreme Court involving state legislative maps. They haven't filed an appeal where they say it. I suppose they're going to say the same thing here if they lose. But I don't worry a whole lot about what Republican politicians say. They're just going to say what they're going to say. If we win if my team wins in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, that's a victory for voters, and I think the citizens of Wisconsin can take that to the bank.
Let's finish off with this. What is the timeline for next steps in Wisconsin?
So just filed a lawsuit. Like we are literally talking, now the ink is dry. It was just, I got a notice just before this that the court accepted the pleadings. So that's good. So we don't have anything from the state Supreme Court by way of scheduling order or anything like that. But I expect that they will move very fast. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has a history of hearing these cases and moving these cases quickly. I would expect that certainly that we'll know what the schedule is within a week or so. And certainly before the end of February, I think we'll have an answer. I think it'll be actually more closer to the middle of February, but certainly by the end of February, we'll have an answer, and you and I will have a lot more to talk about.
Okay, and obviously to hear more about that, again, if you're not yet signed up for Democracy Docket, please make sure to sign up. I'll put the link on this screen and in the post description of this video. Again, that is the best way to support the work that Marc and his team are doing, especially with moments like this, moments that I've been like begging for. So with that said, I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.